I'd like to introduce you to a project I've been working on for going over 3 years now. Operation Freeboat. Oh, God. Jesus, I don't film stuff with the front-facing camera often, if you can't tell. Um, so yeah, uh, this, as the name implies, is a boat that I got for free. And I'm trying to make it seaworthy with, well, spending as little money as possible without also killing myself in the process, which means I'm still spending too much money on it. So the heart of this whole thing is a 12-foot single-hull aluminum John boat that I managed to get for free. Let me get out of this before I kill myself trying to show you it. But before we start talking about that, let me tell you how this whole cascade transpired. So the first step in this whole process was this Honda BF 9.9A that I got for free. First day on the job for my current full-time position. Before it was full-time, my boss and I went out to talk to a dude, and really generous, nice old elderly couple, and he insisted and required that I take this boat motor before I left. So I ended up with this boat motor, and after I got that, I was like, well, heck, I've always wanted a little John boat to putt around the creek in, and so I set out trying to get myself a boat. From there, I managed to get a trawling motor and an AGM deep cell. I guess technically I had those beforehand. That came from a friend before he moved. And then at the other job I was working at the time, there was an old, shitty, makeshift, rusty-ass boat trailer parked behind the garage that came with the property my employer bought. That had an old wooden boat on it, and I didn't want the boat because it was old and wooden, and I didn't have any time to fool with a wooden boat. So boat went to somebody else, and they gave me the trailer to get rid of it, and that's where the first bit of money got spent, because it had a set of ATV tires on it, and one of them was super flat. So I had to buy those wheels to put on the trailer to be able to move anything anywhere without, scraping the bottom of the frame on any speed bumps. And the reason why I went out of my way to get that trailer when all I had was a motor is because the neighbor of the guy who gave me the motor offered me his Sunfish Sailor. It was like an original, first series 1965 run. He'd bought it, he was in his 80s. He'd bought it when he was my age, and had good fun with it. His kids had good fun with it, but it'd seen better days, and it just needed some TLC. So I took that, I worked on it, cleaned it up a bit, patched all the holes in the hull, but I didn't want a sailboat. So eventually I was able to find a friend of a friend who owned a sailing school, and I just donated it to her. And so she took it. She was delighted. It had all the hardware, all the original hardware still with it, although it was in rough shape. And so I let them have it, and that went to a much better home. And that's teaching some kid how to sail, and not me letting it collect water and grow mosquitoes in my yard. And then, not too long after that, I found this boat on the job at a client, if you will. We don't really have clients, but at their house, leaning up against a tree. And I asked them, hey, if you ever want to get rid of that, I'll buy it off of you. And they said, buy it, you can have the damn thing, just come get it. So I did just that. And in order to use this trailer, I had to buy wheels to put on it to move that sailboat back to my house so I could do all the hull work. So I already had the trailer set up and ready to go, so I loaded this sucker up and took it back to the house. And it needed some love. I had to rebuild the entire transom. I had a whole bunch of pinhole leaks back on the back from aluminum corrosion. So I patched all of that up with some 3M 5200 and splapped on all the transom and all this hardware with some stainless steel bolts. So all in all, I spent $70 building that, buying the plywood and all the stainless steel hardware and the 5200. Spent $90 on new wheels and tires. And then after I got this, I was like, well, heck, now all I'm missing is a motor. Except I got a motor. So then I had to get this motor running. And luckily, the guy I got it from had just totally had the car rebuilt, all the oil and fluids changed about 2 years before he gave it to me. So when I went to fire this up, after priming the system, it fired on the third pull. I was absolutely blown away. But it turns out the whole cooling system needed some love. So then that probably took me 6 months to finally figure out what the issue was. I had to rebuild the impeller, replace the gaskets down on the water pump. I had to pull the intake manifold off in order to replace that gasket, which I may not have had to have done. I had to pull the thermostat housing off, had to replace the thermostat gasket. The thermostat was stuck, so I had to beat on that till it was free. And then I also replaced the spark plugs for good measure because I needed the extra $5 to get free shipping on the other gaskets. Then it took me, then after I did all that, I just could not get water to come out of the pee hole. And there was no water getting up to the block. And it took me months to finally figure out what the problem was. I took the whole bottom of the extension case off, and then I finally figured it out. I didn't have the dang water pipe in the correct hole. I had it shoved in the exhaust port. Because there's like a tiny little hole back behind the exhaust port that you physically cannot see if you just take the propeller housing off. So after I did that, she ran like a champ. So now I've got a running motor. I've got a boat that floats with a transom that'll hold a motor. And now all that's left is the trailer, and that's what I've been working on. I've really started putting in a serious effort with this thing the last couple of months. And what I've done most recently with this trailer is I created this stop right here to keep the boat from running into the winch. It could probably be a little further out, but I don't care. Let's see. I replaced the 2x4 rails with 2x8s to give it a little more height, and then I just yesterday put this piece of carpet that I got from a closet at my church, and I put that on the stop and I put that on the rails. In the last couple of weeks, I've been working out how to put a suspension on this thing, because this homemade trailer that I'm thinking was built sometime in the 90s was only designed to move a boat back and forth like 200 feet on one property to a boat ramp. So it was not intended to ever be used on the road or on a highway or on bumpy roads, so it had no suspension. And I can tell you right now, I put that old beater boat on that thing with that 100-pound motor and haul that at 55 miles an hour on South Carolina back roads to a boat launch somewhere, it's going to implode and it's going to fall apart at the seams. So it needs a suspension. But at that point, it would just be cheaper to buy, a used trailer for like $100 from somebody. But I'm stupid. So what I did is I found an old V-hole trailer that was buried back in the woods at my uncle's tractor shed yet again. And the axle on that was totally rotten out on one corner, and the frame was rotten out in two places. But it had a suspension. So I took and the best part was it had a suspension that had its own contained leaf spring mount, and it was held on with bolts. It wasn't welded in place. So I cannibalized that off. I got the 5 stud hubs, got the wheels, I got the mud flaps, I got the whole winch thing, and I got me a third wheel for the front. And then I retrofitted those spring mounts onto this piece of U-channel post, and I've got that held in with absolutely the wrong hardware. And yeah, and that also gives me a lot of elevation, because that's an issue, because before I put the suspension on this and before I put the 2x8s on there, that motor would drag on that thing, because this has no drop down at the front. So it sits like this, and I had to get a 5-inch drop trailer hitch to be able to haul it behind the Jeep and not have the back of the trailer drag on the ground. So after I gave it that plenty of height, I was not able to find a axle for free anywhere, so I gave up. And for $100 from Northern Tool, I bought myself a 72-inch, 1.5-inch square tube axle, and I've got both 4 lug and 5 lug hubs I can use, except those don't have any studs because, of course, the lug nuts were seized onto the studs, so I had to angle grind the back of the lug studs off to get the lug nuts off of those wheels, and those wheels are also in terrible condition. But I kind of like them better, nice and tall. And I bought some square U-bolts to hold on the axle, and I also, with coupon code and their $100 free shipping, I was able to get a free set of trailer lights, which I'm going to put on there after this. And then just this week, I cobbled together these PVC pylons with one nice piece of thin PVC and one that is cobbled together with 4 pieces of PVC, and I didn't have any PVC cement that hadn't turned into goo or hadn't turned into a gelatinous blob, so I had to put it together with wood screws and some wire nuts, but that works. And then that's just shoved down onto a piece of aluminum angle iron, came off of like a windowsill or something like that I folded the corners over and bolted to the U-channel. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm gonna hope I can leave that old axle on there. I think with the new axle on there, I'll have and those hubs moved onto it, I'll have just enough room for the back of the tire to clear that without me having to zip off the old axle. But we'll see. That's currently where she is. I got a motor that runs. I got a boat that I think floats. I haven't put it in the water yet, but it holds rainwater just fine, so I'm assuming it floats. But I don't have an axle that rolls and bounces. It does roll, but doesn't bounce. And hopefully I'll have that here shortly. And when I put on that new axle, I'll go in depth on what I did to make this horrendous makeshift trailer suspension. So that's Operation Free Boat. That's where I stand. The next biggest hurdle ahead of me is getting clear title to both the boat and the motor, because the motor has never been registered or titled in any state, and the boat has never been titled, and it's only been registered in North Carolina. The last time it was registered was 24 years ago, 96. So here in South Carolina, if you want to operate a personal watercraft on public waterways with a outboard motor greater than 5 horsepower, and that's 9.9, you have to have title to both the boat and the motor, and you have to register both and pay property taxes on them. I was kind of hoping to trade that motor for one that's like less than 5 horsepower, so I don't have to go through any of that. But with Corona going on and how much pain that boat motor was just to get running, I don't want to go through that again. I'll just eat the whatever it is a year, $20-30 a year to have the whole thing registered, and then not have to worry about it. But that's going to be a process. I have to go through a whole affidavit thing. I was working on that this morning. That might be a nightmare. But anyway, you're not going to have to deal with any of that, just me. You just get to watch me be an idiot and use these excessively rusty salt-soaked parts and probably risk my life and or get stranded out in the ocean. So until then, stick with me. It's going to be a ride. Time out.